A group of racist thugs made the mistake of targeting the wrong man when they decided to pick a fight with someone who appeared quiet and unassuming. What they didn't know was that this man was none other than Mike Tyson, the legendary boxer and one of the most powerful fighters in the world. It all started with petty provocations but quickly escalated into an unimaginable confrontation. Would these arrogant troublemakers back off before it's too late? Or would they pay a steep price for their recklessness? Stay tuned to uncover the shocking twists in this gripping story. If you enjoy thrilling and inspiring tales like this, don't forget to subscribe to the channel today. The story begins when Mike Tyson, the former heavyweight boxing champion of the world, drove through a small town. He decided to stop at a diner for a meal. As he stepped out of his black SUV, his presence caught the attention of a group of racist bikers loitering outside. They eyed him with sneers and muttered among themselves, convinced he didn't belong there. In their minds, a plan to provoke him was already forming. But what they didn't realize was that they were about to cross paths with one of the strongest fighters the world had ever seen. Mike Tyson was about to teach them a lesson they would never forget. The camera pans across the parking lot in front of the small diner. The area is dominated by the sight of motorcycles and the rowdy laughter of a group of men. At the center of this group stands a burly figure named Duke, their leader. Duke and his crew sat outside, drinking and laughing, their voices loud and laced with crude, offensive remarks directed at anyone who didn't fit into their narrow idea of belonging. Their jeers and aggressive demeanor made passers-by hesitant, too intimidated to intervene. Amidst this chaotic scene, Mike Tyson's black SUV pulled in. Despite his global fame, he had chosen to dress modestly that day, donning a hoodie and jeans in an effort to stay low-key. He was there to meet an old friend and grab a bite to eat. As he stepped out of the vehicle, his imposing presence immediately caught the attention of everyone nearby. But Duke's gang, blinded by their arrogance, failed to recognize the legendary boxer. They saw him only as a stranger who had dared to enter their so-called territory. Duke smirked, his gaze fixed on Mike Tyson. With a mocking sneer, he tilted his chin and called out, "Look at this guy. Thinks he's too good for a biker, huh?" His voice dripped with provocation, clearly intending to draw Mike into a confrontation. The rest of the gang erupted into raucous laughter, their eyes gleaming with hostility, as if itching for a fight the moment he showed the slightest sign of resistance. But Mike Tyson remained calm. He didn't flinch at their taunts. Without so much as a glance in their direction, he walked past them, his stride confident and unbothered. The crowd was stunned. Their laughter abruptly stopped as they watched him approach the diner's entrance. His indifference struck at their pride, fueling their resentment. Duke and his gang exchanged sharp, sinister looks. They didn't need to speak to understand what needed to be done. Their patience had run out. The atmosphere thickened, heavy with tension, as if the air itself was bracing for the explosion to come. While Duke and his gang plotted their next move, they remained blissfully unaware of the storm they were about to unleash. Inside the diner, Mike Tyson maintained his unassuming demeanor. He ordered a burger and quietly chose a seat by the window, a vantage point from which he could clearly see the parking lot. Outside, Duke and his gang lingered, their bravado undiminished despite being ignored by Tyson's unwavering calm. When the group's scrutinizing eyes fell on the unmistakable black SUV parked conspicuously among their motorcycles, a glint of malice flashed in Duke's eyes. His lips curled into a twisted smile as a chaotic and vengeful thought began to take shape. Duke sneered and turned to his crew, his voice dripping with disdain. "Who does he think he is, parking that shiny ride next to our bikes?" He gestured sharply at Tyson's SUV, his words tinged with envy and resentment. The gang, riled up by Duke's taunts, began to simmer with anger, their collective hostility growing into a volatile force. "We can't let some flashy outsider roll into our town and think he owns the place," Duke hissed, his eyes burning with spite. His words were like gasoline on smoldering embers, igniting the group's latent aggression into a cruel resolve. Dawson, a wiry man with slicked back hair and a sinister grin, stood up. Cracking his knuckles with a menacing snap, he sneered, "Let's teach him a little respect." His cold smile widened as he began walking toward the diner's entrance. Behind him, the gang erupted in cheers of approval, their bloodlust apparent in their eager eyes. As Dawson strode into the diner, his swagger reeked of arrogance. His gaze locked onto Tyson, seated by the window, completely unaware, or so he thought, of the danger closing in. Approaching the table, Dawson leaned casually against its edge, his voice dripping with mockery. "Hey, buddy," he drawled, his smirk growing more condescending with every word. "Nice car out there, but I think you'd better move it unless you want it to get scratched." The thinly veiled threat hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Dawson's smug grin spoke volumes about his confidence in the gang's strength and their willingness to back his words with action. Finally, Mike Tyson looked up, his piercing gaze locked onto Dawson, his expression unreadable but charged with intensity. He studied his would-be challenger with the precision of a predator assessing its prey. Then, in a voice low and steady, he replied, "I'm just here to eat. Don't start something you can't finish." Tyson's warning, though brief, carried the weight of a man used to being heated. His voice, calm but laced with barely restrained anger, only thickened the tension in the air. It was a storm waiting to break. But Dawson wasn't deterred. Leaning in closer, the sour stench of cheap beer on his breath, he pressed on with his intimidation. His cruel smile widened as he lowered his voice, a venomous whisper dripping with malice. "Start something? Who said anything about that?" With a sudden, forceful slap of his palm against the table, Dawson leaned back, his eyes gleaming with defiance. "Who's talking about trouble? Huh?" His voice grated like the hiss of a viper, deliberately taunting. "I'm just offering a friendly suggestion." The air in the diner grew suffocating, heavy with an impending sense of violence. It felt as though the walls themselves were holding their breath, caught between the unyielding calm of Tyson and the escalating aggression of Dawson. Then, out of nowhere, a sharp voice sliced through the oppressive atmosphere like a blade. "Hey, leave him alone." All heads turned toward the source of the interruption. The speaker was the waitress, a young woman with a determined expression and eyes filled with a mix of compassion and resolve. Her voice rang out firmly, unwavering in its demand. "He hasn't bothered anyone. Let him eat in peace." Dawson's gaze, darkened by fury, snapped to her. For a moment, his expression was that of a predator considering its next prey. His lips curled in a snarl, a low growl rumbling from his throat as he stared her down. It seemed as though he might unleash his anger on her instead, but after a tense pause, he reeled himself in. Shooting her one last, venomous glare, he turned away. "Mind your own business," he spat, his voice cold as steel. The rest of the meal passed uneventfully, though the charged silence in the diner lingered like an unspoken threat. When Tyson finally rose from his seat, he moved with deliberate slowness, his every step calm and measured. He made his way to the door, his focus fixed on the parking lot. Outside, where Duke and his gang loitered like storm clouds gathering on the horizon. The moment Tyson stepped outside, the gang closed in, surrounding him with a predatory intent that was impossible to ignore. The tension in the air was almost tangible, vibrating like a plucked string. At the center of the group, Duke stepped forward, his posture confident and his face alight with smug triumph. His smile was oily, a thin veneer barely masking the malice underneath. "In a rush, are we?" he drawled, his voice a mocking challenge. Dragging out his words, he added with a sneer, "We figured you'd want to stick around. You look like someone who knows how to have a good time." The grin on his face was a lie. There was no invitation in his words, only the promise of conflict. His eyes betrayed the truth. He intended for Tyson to experience anything but a good time. Tyson stopped in his tracks, every movement fluid yet deliberate. He slipped his hands into his pockets, exuding an air of calm confidence. His sharp, unyielding gaze locked onto Duke with an intensity that could cut through steel. In a voice as deep as thunder, he spoke, "I don't want trouble. Let me walk away, and we can all forget this ever happened." The gang exchanged uncertain glances, clearly recognizing the steel in Tyson's words. Yet, emboldened by Duke's swagger and leadership, they burst into harsh, mocking laughter. The cruel sound spread like wildfire, filling the air with its grating malice. Riding the wave of his gang's support, Duke stepped closer, his eyes gleaming with defiance. He jabbed a finger into Tyson's chest, his voice hissing like poison. "You're gonna regret ever coming here." His hot breath brushed against Tyson's skin as his words cut through the tension like a blade. "We're gonna teach you a lesson about respecting the Iron Wolves." Tyson didn't flinch. He stood motionless, his face a mask of implacable resolve. His silence, his stillness, it only served to fuel Duke's growing rage. Unable to tolerate Tyson's calm any longer, Duke jerked his head toward his crew in a sharp, silent signal. The gang moved as one, their aggression spilling over like a dam breaking. They surged forward, surrounding Tyson in a menacing circle, their heavy footsteps brimming with intent. "Show him what happens when someone crosses us," Duke roared, his voice a venomous snarl, dripping with fury. But before the pack of wolves could strike, Tyson made his move. He exploded into action, a force of nature unleashed. His punches came like lightning, blindingly fast and impossibly powerful. The first two attackers didn't even have time to react. Tyson's fists collided with their faces like sledgehammers, the sickening crack of bone echoing across the parking lot. In mere seconds, two of Duke's men crumpled to the ground, unconscious and bleeding, their bodies twisted like discarded marionettes. The remaining gang members froze, their eyes wide with shock as they stared at their fallen comrades. A tense, eerie silence blanketed the scene, broken only by the howl of the wind. For a moment, the gang hesitated, fear flickering in their eyes. But rage quickly overtook their better judgment, the taste of vengeance drowning out their instincts for self-preservation. Their fury ignited, they tightened their circle around Tyson, preparing to strike again. Duke, his eyes blazing with hatred, pulled a heavy chain from his back pocket. The metallic links glinted ominously in the fading sunlight as he wrapped it around his fist, the cold clinking sound cutting through the tense air like a knife. Another member of the gang brandished a baseball bat, raising it high. His knuckles turned white as he gripped the handle tightly, veins bulging with anticipation. The gang tightened their circle around Tyson, the noose of their menace drawing closer with every step. A cruel smirk spread across Duke's face, and he let the chain dangle from his hand, swinging it slowly like a venomous serpent ready to strike. His voice, sharp and icy, carried across the parking lot. "You made a big mistake, tough guy." The weight of his words hung in the air like a death sentence. The gravity of the situation was unmistakable, even to Tyson. With measured calm, Tyson clenched his fists, the sound of his knuckles cracking loud and deliberate. It was a warning, a harbinger of the power about to be unleashed. His gaze shifted, narrowing with icy focus, transforming from quiet restraint to the steely resolve of a warrior stepping onto the battlefield. "You don't want to do this," he said, his voice a low, dangerous growl. Each syllable resonated with the restrained ferocity of a storm waiting to erupt. But his final warning fell on deaf ears. Their rage and thirst for vengeance drowned out any semblance of reason. With wild, animalistic cries, the gang descended upon him in a whirlwind of violence. Fists, kicks, chains, and bats all aimed to crush. But Tyson was no ordinary man. He moved like a force of nature, a tempest unleashed. In the chaos, he became a blur, dodging and weaving through the onslaught with an agility that defied belief. His punches and kicks struck with the precision and power of a wrecking ball, each blow landing like a thunderclap. The scene was chaos incarnate, a symphony of raw, brutal energy. The sounds of fists meeting flesh and the agonized groans of the gang members echoed like cries from the depths of hell. In slow motion, the camera captured Tyson's every move. Each punch was a masterpiece of controlled violence, each dodge a dance of survival. His every step, every strike, was a testament to the perfect marriage of power and grace honed over decades in the ring. Amid the frenzy, Tyson was unstoppable, a storm tearing through the wolves that had dared to challenge him. His reflexes were lightning fast, sidestepping incoming blows with ease, his counters devastatingly precise. One by one, the gang fell, their bodies crumpling to the pavement under the relentless might of his fists. What had begun as a planned ambush was quickly unraveling into a catastrophic defeat. The ferocity of the fight was matched only by the composure and control Tyson displayed, an embodiment of years of relentless training and a storied career in the ring. Duke, his face swollen with fury and bruises, stumbled backward, struggling to regain his footing under the onslaught of Tyson's unstoppable blows. His eyes darted wildly, searching for an escape, yet finding none. Breathing in ragged, uneven gasps, Duke reached into his pocket in a desperate bid to turn the tide. With a sharp click, he flipped open a folding knife, its blade glinting menacingly in the dimming light. "Let's see how tough you really are," he roared, his voice a mix of rage and despair. Tyson's eyes narrowed, a glacial determination flickering within them. His face hardened, transforming into a mask of unshakable resolve, a warrior's focus honed to perfection. Without hesitation, Tyson took a deliberate step toward Duke, his movements calm, calculated, and predatory. "You're about to find out," he growled, his voice low and foreboding, carrying the weight of inevitable retribution. Fueled by desperation, Duke lunged forward, the knife gleaming in his hand. But his frenzied attack met only empty air as Tyson sidestepped with effortless precision. In a single fluid motion, Tyson seized Duke's wrist and twisted it sharply. A pained cry escaped Duke's lips as the knife clattered to the ground with a metallic clang. Tyson's response was brutal and efficient, the perfect contrast to Duke's chaotic aggression. He swept Duke's legs from under him and pinned him to the ground, his knee pressing firmly into Duke's chest. The shift in power was absolute. What had started as a hunt had now flipped. The predator had become the prey. With Duke immobilized beneath him, Tyson's voice rang out across the parking lot, cold and commanding. "Don't pick fights with people for no reason." His eyes burned with steely conviction, boring into Duke's as if delivering a judgment. The fight was over. Around the lot, Duke's gang lay sprawled on the asphalt like discarded wreckage, their battered bodies a testament to Tyson's unmatched strength and skill. Inside the diner, onlookers who had watched the battle through the windows erupted into cheers. The sound of applause and triumphant cries filled the air, reverberating with admiration and gratitude for the legendary Mike Tyson. Tyson, his fists still clenched, let his gaze sweep over the scene with quiet intensity. His breathing steadied as the threat dissipated. With deliberate calm, he dusted off his hoodie, his sharp eyes lingering briefly on the broken remnants of Duke's gang scattered across the pavement. The moment was one of quiet finality. Tyson's aura of invincibility stood unshaken, leaving behind a scene that would not soon be forgotten. As the dust began to settle, the sharp wail of sirens pierced the night air, signaling the arrival of the local police. A patrol car screeched to a halt in the parking lot, its headlights cutting through the remnants of the chaos that had unfolded moments before. The beams illuminated the battered gang. Members sprawled on the ground and the commanding figure of Mike Tyson, standing tall amidst the wreckage. The sheriff, a seasoned man with a keen eye, stepped out of the car. His gaze swept over the scene, lingering briefly on the defeated thugs before landing on Tyson. A faint smile tugged at his lips as he approached the legendary boxer, his breath carrying a soft chuckle. Tyson, still riding the adrenaline of his triumph, met the sheriff's gaze with a calm, easy smile. It was a smile that softened his otherwise formidable demeanor, a flicker of warmth in a night that had been anything but gentle. "Just teaching them a little manners," Tyson said, his voice tinged with humor, a light-hearted note cutting through the lingering tension. The sheriff extended his hand, and Tyson accepted it. Their handshake was firm and mutual, a silent exchange of respect between two men who had faced the darker sides of humanity in their own ways. Meanwhile, the battered members of the Iron Wolves were hauled to their feet one by one. The sheriff's deputies moved swiftly, snapping cuffs onto their wrists with practiced efficiency. The gang's feeble protests fell on deaf ears, drowned out by the sound of car doors slamming shut as they were loaded into the back of the patrol vehicles. The cars pulled away into the night, sirens fading into the distance. The muffled cries of the defeated were swallowed by the quiet, leaving behind a profound sense of relief that washed over the townspeople. The oppressive shadow of the iron wolves, which had loomed over the town for so long, was finally lifted. The threat had been shattered by the unyielding spirit and indomitable fists of Mike Tyson. As Tyson climbed into his black SUV, the townspeople who had watched from the safety of the diner began to clap. Tentative at first, the applause quickly swelled into a thunderous ovation. The cheers were raw and heartfelt, a spontaneous outpouring of gratitude for the man who had restored justice and peace to their lives in one courageous act. The sound of their applause echoed in the parking lot as Tyson drove away, his SUV's tires screeching softly against the asphalt before disappearing into the darkness. Alone on the endless stretch of highway, the adrenaline coursing through his veins began to ebb. The hum of the engine filled the silence as Tyson's mind replayed the events of the evening. The night stretched out before him, quiet and vast, as his thoughts lingered on the clash that had ended in victory. It wasn't just another fight. It was a reminder of the strength that still coursed through him, strength not just of body, but of character. The memories replayed in his mind like a slow-motion reel, standing tall amidst the chaos, facing a tide of violence alone. As these images flickered through his thoughts, he spoke softly to himself, his voice low and reflective. His words, forged by years of hard-earned wisdom, carried the weight of a truth honed through the fires, of a legendary career. This story is a powerful testament to courage, resilience, and the strength that comes from standing up for what is right. If you were in Mike Tyson's shoes, how would you react? Have you ever faced injustice or stood up to defend what you believed in? Share your story and thoughts in the comments. It might just inspire someone or give them the strength they need. If you found this story meaningful, don't hesitate to share it with your friends and loved ones to spread the message of justice and bravery. Thank you for following along and supporting the channel. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe so you don't miss more thought-provoking stories to come. Every story, every small act, has the potential to make this world a better place. See you in the next story. Stay strong, and may you always find inspiration in life. Thank you for supporting our channel. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to stay updated on the latest content. These stories are sourced from various places and do not represent any specific individual or organization. They are shared to promote the universal values of humanity and have been rewritten with the help of AI. If there are any inaccuracies, we appreciate your understanding. Wishing you all the best in life.